Many thanks to Stephanie Ward and Milo Lewis and Jesse Thompson for helping arrange this webinar logistically and getting the word out to everyone. And thanks to everyone joining us today for the time. And again, I will get through our slides and information, and we'll have some time for questions at the end. So for those of you who may not know me, I am with the North Carolina Department of Agriculture. I'm in the Veterinary Division, and I'm the Director of Livestock Animal Health Programs. All right, let's talk about some New World screwworm today. Hopefully I can get my slides to work. There we go. So what is New World screwworm? It's been in the news here recently and starting to gain more and more attention. Screwworm is actually the larval form or the maggots of a specific species of fly. These female flies, they are attracted to wounds or mucosal surfaces of warm-blooded animals. The wounds can be as small as like a tick bite. They can be production type wounds such as a castration site, a branding or a tagging site. And it can also include rut injuries in some of our cervid species as well. The nose and the eyes and the umbilicus of newborns, those serosal surfaces and areas are also very attractive to these maggots. And the female flies will lay their eggs at the chosen site. And this is typically along the edge of one of these wounds. After these eggs hatch, these larvae burrow into the animal and they feed on the living tissue of the animal, which is a pretty important distinction between some of the other maggot species that we may find on our livestock in the summertime, the warm summer months. Again, these screwworms do feed on living tissue, and the resulting condition is referred to as myiasis. Here on the right is a pretty good picture that sort of gives you a good look at the different forms of this pest. You can see there along the edge of the wound, the eggs are laid in pretty tightly stacked rows and columns. There's a female fly. They're indicated in the middle. And then if you look into the wound, you can see some of the larvae or maggots that are actively feeding on the living tissue of this animal. And these maggots can be found very deep into the wound. So oftentimes you would need to, if you're extracting those, go pretty deep to get adequate specimens. There's also the possibility of co-infection with other maggot species as well. And I'll get into that a little bit further later on. These lesions and infections with the screwworm are typically fatal if there is no intervention taken. And again, these female flies will lay their eggs on any warm-blooded animal. In our livestock species, cattle are very common, as are horses. We do also see sheep, goats, hogs, and farm cervid as well. Companion animal species are often an early indicator species that small animal veterinarians may encounter. Dogs, cats, pet pigs, and then of course wildlife as well, deer and feral swine. There are cases in birds. It does tend to be somewhat rare, as well as in humans, also somewhat rare. Here's a pretty good overview of the life cycle of the New World screwworm. The adult female, she will find a suitable host. Oftentimes it is cattle, and she'll lay her eggs around the wound orifice. And in 12 to 24 hours, we have these larvae that emerge in different forms that are in this larval stage for about 5 to 7 days. And that window, that short window is pretty important. That's our window for detection and intervention, after which that point they will fall off into the ground to pupate and then emerge as an adult fly in 6 to 8 days later. The entire cycle can be as fast as about 21 days. Some important points about this life cycle: the flies are most active between 64 and 91 degrees Fahrenheit, with peak activity being a little bit warmer around 85. They do prefer wooded areas, but they will also seek out hosts in pastures as well. The females only breed one time. That's significant a little bit later on when I talk about control measures. And then this, again, short larval stage, that time period makes early detection and intervention absolutely critical. So now I'll talk a little bit about the history of New World screwworm and the eradication programs. We did have New World screwworm in the United States since about the mid 1800s in the Southwest. There were significant production issues in the Southeast as well in the 1930s. The sterile insect technique, which I will go into more details on a little bit later, was used to eradicate this pest from the U.S., and that goal was accomplished in 1966. Continued to push these flies further south with this sterile insect technique, and it was eradicated from Mexico as well in 1991. And you can see on the map on the right here, we have when these eradication programs were started and how they did continue to push this pest further and further to the south to Panama, which is the very southern blue area on the map there. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Panama, that narrow isthmus of land there was where Panama and the United States formed the Commission for the Eradication and Prevention of Screwworm, often referred to as COPEG. This was established in 1994. And again, the goal was to establish a permanent biological barrier of these sterile flies in Panama due to that perfect geographic region there to maintain a control area for eradication. And eradication of Western Panama was accomplished in 2006. So what is this sterile insect technique? So the COPEG facility that the U.S. established with Panama, they do raise sterile flies at this facility. This facility has been effective in maintaining this barrier at the Darien Gap in Panama. The flies are irradiated, which causes sterility, and then the sterile male flies will mate with wild female flies. So how does this work? The sterilization does not change adult fly behavior, so they still do mate as they normally would. However, the method is to release enough sterile male flies that they will overwhelm the wild male fly population. And therefore, since the female flies only mate once, if they mate with sterile males, their eggs will not hatch. So it's been a very effective technique for many years. Here's a picture of the COPEG site down in Panama. They have a really nice website with a lot of information and good graphics for anyone who's interested. And there at the bottom, you can see some of the pupae that they produce at that facility. All right, now I'll talk a little bit about the current outbreak and the reason for this webinar, getting the information out to everyone. There were some detections past the barrier zone in Panama in 2022. There were additional detections in 2023 in Costa Rica, as they did see this fly start to move northward past this Darien Gap barrier zone in Panama. And then in 2024, there were detections in Honduras, Guatemala, and Mexico. So continued northward movement of the New World screwworm, causing concern, obviously. In November of 2024 was the first case in Mexico. It was in the state of Chiapas, and that is right here just north of the Guatemalan border. Then in January and February of 2025, the Mexican states of Campeche, Tabasco, Quintana Roo, and Yucatan also had detections. And those states, again, comprise this border with Guatemala and also the Mexican Yucatan Peninsula here. So at that time, they established a buffer zone at the Isthmus of Tehuantepec. And that is this isthmus right here that separates the Mexican Yucatan Peninsula and the area adjacent to the Guatemalan border and the Mexican state of Chiapas from Greater Mexico proper in an attempt to stop the northward movement of these flies into Mexico. However, unfortunately, in April and May, The Mexican states of Veracruz and Oaxaca, both north of this barrier region, did have detections, therefore indicating a breach of the fly through this barrier at Tehuantepec. At that time, due to the northward movement, Secretary Rollins did suspend live animal imports of cattle, bison, and horses into the U.S. from Mexico. And at that time, it was stated that this would be reevaluated on a monthly basis. Here are some figures for Mexico specifically related to the current outbreak. You can see the majority of cases are in cattle, 82%, followed up by horses and dogs and swine. You can also see there that there have been a number of cases in humans, and it's been anecdotally reported that is likely underreported due to surveillance and the fact that mandatory reporting is not required for human cases. Again, this detection in Oaxaca indicating a breach of this attempted barrier zone is the case of most concern currently. It is about 127 miles past that buffer zone, and it was a native animal that had no history of transport. There is currently, at the time of these slides, no wildlife surveillance in place. We are still about 600 miles from the U.S. border. Here are some figures from the COPEG site. This would include all of the cases in all of the countries since the detection in Panama in 2022. Again, you can see those percentages are still pretty similar, with the vast majority of those being in cattle. And then we have dogs, pigs, and horses, as well as humans up there in our top 10. So what happened in 2022 to cause this breach at Panama? Well, COVID-19, that was one of the reasons. Again, it would be staffing issues and other concerns related to continuation of development and release of these sterile flies. There was a reported fly strain efficacy decrease as well. And then a change in the geography there, the Darien Gap land change. Historically, there was very few livestock in the region. It was heavily forested and not well populated. In recent years, deforestation and pasture conversion for grazing of cattle has encouraged livestock movements into the area, both legal and illegal. So that has resulted in the likely breach 2022. So what's being done to stop the advancement of these flies? They have continued to address the fly strain efficacy. That's been corrected with a new fly strain. That release began in August of 2024. Also, they are looking at ways to increase the amount of flies that can be produced. Currently, the COPEG facility in Panama can produce about 110 million flies per week. It's estimated that what we need at this point in time to control and start to eradicate screwworm is about 200 million flies per week. So they are looking at converting a fruit fly facility in Mexico into a sterile fly facility. That's going to be about 18 months, give or take, before that is up and running. Also in the southern U.S., they're looking at either building a sterile fly distribution facility. There's been some talk of a production facility, but currently they're looking at a distribution facility in southern Texas to facilitate distribution of these flies into Mexico. All right, now I'll talk a little bit about an outbreak that we had in the Florida Keys in 2016. If you're not familiar, there is a rare species of white-tailed deer in Florida called the Florida key deer. They are well down into the Keys away from the Florida mainland. In July of 2016 is when they believe the likely first cases were. There was an increase in deer mortality of these key deer in August. However, September was when the first confirmation was made. So I'd like everyone to note that delay from July to September in actually confirming that we have New World screwworm in these Florida key deer. That is one of the reasons that it's so important for us to be sure that we make folks aware that they need to be on the lookout for these larvae and submit them if there's anything unusual. So again, they October of 2016, they did set up an inspection station at Key Largo to inspect any animals leaving the area. So folks who had been down there camping with their pets and whatnot were all inspected before they were allowed to leave that region. Fortunately, there is not a lot of livestock production in that area, of course, so there wasn't a large number of livestock species moving in and out of the area. They did begin sterile fly release in the Keys in October as well. There was one Florida mainland confirmed case. However, it did not delay the eradication efforts due to the early detection of the one case on the mainland. There were no trade restrictions to the state of Florida. Trade restrictions or any restrictions on animal movements were limited to that immediate affected area at that time. Due to the uniqueness of the lack of livestock production in the area, more than likely. The positive cases and presumptive cases in Florida, the vast majority of those were, of course, these Florida key deer. A lot of the injuries were during the rut season, of course. We did have a couple of pet pigs and some companion animals and a raccoon as well. There are about 1,000 of the key deer in this area, so this mortality of 135 was pretty significant. Again, the peak infestation did occur during the rut, and bucks accounted for the majority of the death. And there were some umbilical infestations associated with that event as well. There was a large amount of boots on the ground throughout this event and response. There were wildlife folks, USDA, state personnel actively participating in control and eradication. 188 million sterile flies were released across 35 different sites. They did have medication sites to treat these at-risk deer as well. And they never did identify the source of the outbreak. So we'll talk a little bit about the economic impact. Why is this such a big concern for producers? Obviously, animal deaths are a big issue. Production is obviously going to be decreased. There will be a significant cost for veterinary services, medications, insecticides, additional labor for inspection and treatment, in addition to response activity costs. Here are some figures from a Texas 1976 outbreak. These figures are going to look a little bit different today, of course, for many reasons. One of the biggest changes in Texas at this time would be the large number of farm served facilities that they have in the state now, with specifically high genetic value animals as well. So probably less small ruminant sheep and goat production and much more farm served, but it gives you some idea of the numbers that we could potentially be looking at and what those losses would come from. Again, here's another breakdown. Death loss was pretty high, 42%, marketing losses, additional labor costs. Again, those production losses also pretty significant, and then medication expenses as well. So they did estimate what it would cost to treat if we did have an incursion today. The cost to the state, as you can see, about $452 million for producers, and then the cost to the state far exceeding that as well. Again, these are estimates provided by USDA, and it does not include hunting or served figures. So what exactly are we going to be looking for when we're looking for screwworm? So the larvae would typically be visible in a wound by about day 3. They will be again feeding on living tissue. There's oftentimes a bloody discharge associated with this. You'll see the wounds getting worse or getting larger. And a foul odor could potentially be present as well. This horse has, or pony has an infection, an infestation in the ear, and they've applied a topical treatment to this horse as they remove the larvae. You may see animals depressed, off feed, isolated from the herd, head shaking. Here is a picture of an animal with an ear tag that has an infestation. You can see the larvae present in the wound. And there in the middle of the ear tag, you can see numerous New World screwworm eggs that a female fly has laid. The morbidity is pretty variable. It sort of depends on the conditions and the time of year. Do we have a lot of tick bites? Is it during the rut? Are we actively castrating, branding, doing other production practices? Is it birthing season? Again, it could potentially be seasonal with respect to morbidity. Mortality, again, is usually pretty high, fatal within 1 to 2 weeks if no intervention. And then again, we have our newborn umbilical infections that can be devastating. So what are some of the things folks can do during an outbreak? You want to consider the birthing season to the cooler months outside of the fly season. Routine inspection for maggots, very critical. Those things, again, due to that short life cycle of those maggots, it's important to find them very early and report those, treat those, and ensure that they do not fall off and pupate. Routine inspections for geldings and stallions. And then again, those production practices, move those to the cooler seasons, as well as incorporating fly and tick preventions into your production practices. So again, any of these production practices, shearing, branding, notching, vaccinations, move those to the cooler parts of the year. I want to drive home. There have been 0 detections of New World screwworm in the U.S. This year. There's some misinformation out there, and things get sort of misconstrued. So I want to make sure that it's very clear we've not had any detections in the U.S. working actively to prevent that. Don't try to distinguish between New World screwworm and native flies or maggots in the field. That's where we come in. If you're a practitioner or a seasoned producer and you have maggots in a necrotic, nasty wound that looks like everything you've ever seen before, and there's nothing different about it, that's probably what it is. But if you're not sure, that's what we're here for. But we want to make sure that folks are looking, and if they aren't sure, that they know who to reach out to. And again, a lot of times the wounds could be co-infected with both New World screwworm and native flies. Due to the fact that North Carolina is predominantly a livestock exporter, the fact that the likelihood that our detection in livestock is going to be first in the country is pretty low. It's not 0, of course, but we typically export livestock. We don't bring a lot into the state. However, companion animals are a big concern, and so it's very important that our practitioners and folks are aware to be on the lookout for these in companion animals as well as people. Again, it is reportable, so any veterinarian practicing medicine in North Carolina do need to contact us, State Vet's office, per our regs within 2 hours after the disease is reasonably suspected to exist. The USDA also asks that it is reported to them. I would say whichever one you can get on the phone first is who you need to call. And then CDC as well for those human cases. So if you're a producer, your local veterinarian practitioner, that's who you want to call if you have something that causes concern for you. And then here's the number to our office as well as our local USDA office. So then what do? Well, of course, you'll talk to us and we will come up with a treatment plan, but here's some pretty good guidelines and overview from the USDA Green Book. They recently released an updated copy here just this past month in June on what a response plan could look like, what our strategy is. So in general, you want to clean the wound, warm water, physically remove as many larvae and eggs as possible. We don't want to leave any eggs or any larvae in any of these wounds. You want to keep a lot of those, at least 10 or 12 of the larvae for identification, especially going really deep into those wounds and getting as many larvae as you can. Those can be transported to the lab in 70% alcohol. It's very important to remember to discard any remaining eggs or larvae in a biosecure fashion. So if you're not submitting them to the lab, put those into 70% alcohol so that they will die as well before discarding in a airtight container. We definitely want to apply an effective topical treatment to kill any remaining larvae, as well as a long-acting systemic insecticide. And then we would have discussions about quarantine and treatment of the premises if screwworm is confirmed. USDA has SOPs available for detections in dogs specifically. That has some pretty good information. They do not endorse specific treatments. They do refer to the attending vet to utilize their knowledge, including any off-label considerations, but they do have guidelines available for folks that are interested. And same thing for other species, livestock species other than dogs. Ivermectin is typically our go-to treatment for those animals. And then if we did need to decontaminate the area that these animals have been in, there are some resources there to guide us to products that would be appropriate for that use. Hopefully you all did receive emails from us about this webinar. If you did not, or you know someone who did not, here is a QR code to get you signed up to receive those updates for any information that we have to disseminate. And again, here's your handy contact numbers for our office as well as our local USDA office. And that concludes the slides that I have for today, and I'm happy to take any questions.